Welcome to F360, Indiana Folklore and Folk Life. This is a short episode about a dynamic storytelling tradition that is closely related to jokes, which we have just talked about in our last unit, as well as the personal experience narratives that we'll discuss in our next lecture. What I'm talking about is the tall tale, sometimes referred to as whoppers or lies. It was a popular pastime that I think we should discuss because it demonstrates how storytelling traditions and genres come in and fall out of favor. Stories are grounded in social situations and groups, which also means that they're linked to a specific time and place. The tall tale was predominantly a male genre of storytelling that thrived in the years before World War II, but quickly fell out of fashion with the rise of other public and home entertainments. Before the war, men gathered at local blacksmith shops, general stores, and the like to tell their whoppers. In Nashville, Indiana, the Liar's Bench was a daily gathering place for men to meet and spin yarns about pet catfish, hoop snakes, and a variety of other odd happenings and encounters. Each story was usually told as being true and experienced actually by the teller, but always exaggerated beyond belief. It was a lie that everyone was in on, though. These tales often include hunting and fishing stories, often verifying the skill or luck of the hunter. A popular one that became widespread was called The Wonderful Hunt. Here's a version of that tale that was collected by a tank builder in East Chicago, up in the northern part of our state. The man's name was Herbert Smith, and it was recorded around 1941 by folklorist William Hugh Jansen. You'll remember that name from Esoteric and Exoteric from your reading about Mennonite ethnic slurs. Here's Mr. Smith's story. I'm sorry I haven't found a recording of this, but I'll try to do it justice. Now I'll tell you an experience of mine. We were in the North Country, and it was a cold winter. Our supplies were getting low. In fact, we were out of everything, and I was sent out to get some food. I had an old-fashioned double-barreled shotgun, one of those muzzle loaders that carry a ramrod and a slot between the two barrels. I was hunting through the woods along the edge of the river, looking for anything I could shoot, because we were getting hungry. Suddenly I heard a sound to my right, and down the river there were 27 ducks flying in. 27. I counted them. I was just about to lift my gun and let 'em have it when I heard a sound to my left and up the river. There were about 70 geese coming in. About 70. Too many to count. It didn't take me long to decide on the geese. There were more of them, and there's more meat on a goose. So I was just about to fire on them when I heard a noise behind me. I turned around, and there was a great big rattlesnake. The biggest rattler I ever saw. Well, I didn't know what to do. If I shot the rattler, those ducks and geese wouldn't stay around, and I might not see any more game that day. But I didn't have any choice. Rattler was all coiled up, ready to strike. I was so mad I let him have it with both barrels at the same time. That was more than that old gun could stand. The right barrel twisted around and got about 10 geese. The left barrel twisted off and killed half the ducks. And the ramrod shot out straight forward and took the head clean off that rattler. But that's not all. The force of the explosion threw me backwards into a double somersault right into the river. And you know, when I came out, my boots were full of fish, my coat was full of fish, my shirt was full of fish. Fish were everywhere. Well, they were even inside my vest. So many of them that they broke off the top button. See? I never had it sewed back on. As you can see, the narrative starts as if it was a story about a real occurrence. But it quickly embellishes into a fanciful tale. These lies are stylized untruths. They're not intended to be believed. These stories require everyone to recognize that their leg is being pulled, even down to providing evidence of the lost button. That becomes the trick. Everyone knows that the event is not true, but the teller has to craft it in such a way that the narrative logic makes sense. Here in Bloomington, Jim Pennington was the local master storyteller back in the 40s and 50s. It was first recorded in the spring of 1941 by folklorist Herbert Halpert, while Halpert was a student here at IU. Halpert went on to have an amazing career as a folklorist, recording folk songs and narratives throughout the United States and Canada. Years later, his stories would be collected again by a folklorist named Jan Brunvan, who also became internationally known. He told Broomvon that he stopped telling his tales after World War II because the story context had changed. He explained, "Oh, I quit fooling around about 44. And without the general store, blacksmith shop, and other places like that, people don't tell stories now like they used to." You see, the stories require the right context, both physical but also social. After the war, the small town way of life in Indiana had changed, and other forms of entertainment had gained popularity. Genres of folklore wax and wane. Genres gain popularity, and then they fall out of favor. For example, I've noticed that my Gen Z students don't tell many jokes or interact in the same way that the older millennials did. Instead, their humor seems to center around memes and more smartphone-aided exchanges, often overshadowing the face-to-face joking that was once more common. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it's changed a little bit. Looking at Tall Tales provides insight into the social life of working-class men before World War II, a social way of being in the world that is often invisible from historical records. What parts of your social joking and narrative life that you engage in today do you think people in the future may not understand or think is silly or corny? This is the context of time that we discussed in our last lecture. In our next lecture, we'll discuss personal experience and family stories, which remain our most common way of using stories to explain things to others, understand the world, and build relationships.